The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Kensington Palace as 8-year-old Princess Charlotte walked slowly toward the grand entrance. Her small shoulders seemed to carry a weight far heavier than any child should bear. The previous weeks had been particularly difficult for the young princess, who had been struggling with feelings of loneliness and uncertainty about her place in the royal family. Charlotte had always been a spirited child, full of curiosity and joy. Her infectious laughter could often be heard echoing through the palace corridors as she played with her brothers, Prince George and Prince Louis. But recently, something had changed. The constant pressure of royal duties, the endless photography sessions, and the weight of expectations had begun to take their toll on the young girl's spirit. Her parents, Prince William and Catherine, had noticed the change in their daughter. Charlotte had become quieter during family dinners, less eager to participate in royal engagements, and often retreated to her room earlier than usual. The sparkle in her bright blue eyes had dimmed, and her usually animated conversations had become brief and subdued. Standing at his usual post near the main entrance was Sergeant James Mitchell, a member of the Queen's Guard who had been protecting the royal family for over 15 years. James was a tall, distinguished man in his early 40s, with kind eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. He had served in the military for 20 years before joining the Royal Protection Unit, and his dedication to his duty was unwavering. James had been watching Princess Charlotte for several weeks now, and his experienced eye had picked up on the subtle changes in her demeanor. As a father of 2 daughters himself, he understood the challenges that young girls faced, even those born into privilege. His own daughters, Emma and Sophie, were close to Charlotte's age, and he often saw similarities between them. The sergeant had always maintained the strict protocol required of his position, but he had also developed a genuine affection for the royal children. He had watched them grow from toddlers into young people, and he felt a protective instinctiveness toward them that went beyond his professional obligations. Charlotte, in particular, had always held a special place in his heart because of her spirited nature and her kindness toward the palace staff. On this particular morning, as Charlotte approached the entrance where James stood guard, she walked more slowly than usual. Her head was down, and she seemed lost in thought. The vibrant energy that usually surrounded her was noticeably absent, replaced by a melancholy that was heartbreaking to witness in such a young child. James had been thinking about Charlotte's situation for days. He had overheard conversations between her parents about their concerns, and he had witnessed firsthand the moments when the young princess seemed overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon her. As someone who had dedicated his life to protecting the royal family, James felt compelled to do something to help, even though it meant stepping outside the boundaries of his typical responsibilities. The idea had come to him the previous evening while he was at home with his own family. His daughter Emma had been showing him a craft project she had made at school, and suddenly James knew exactly what he wanted to do for Princess Charlotte. It was a simple gesture, but one that came from the heart and was inspired by his understanding of what it meant to be a child in need of comfort and encouragement. As Charlotte reached the entrance, she glanced up briefly at Sergeant Mitchell. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in that instant, James saw the sadness that the young princess was trying so hard to hide. It reminded him of the times when his own daughters had struggled with difficulties at school or with friendships, and his paternal instincts kicked in immediately. Charlotte offered a small, polite smile, the kind of smile she had been taught to give in public, but James could see that it didn't reach her eyes. She continued past him into the palace, her footsteps echoing softly on the marble floors. James remained at his post, but his mind was already working on the plan he had been developing. The palace was bustling with activity as usual. Staff members hurried about their duties, preparing for the day's scheduled events and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Charlotte made her way through the familiar corridors, passing portraits of her ancestors and the ornate decorations that had adorned the palace for generations. Despite the grandeur surrounding her, she felt more alone than ever. In her private sitting room, Charlotte sat by the large window that overlooked the palace gardens. She watched as gardeners tended to the perfectly manicured lawns and flower beds, their work seeming so peaceful and purposeful. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to have such a simple, uncomplicated life, where the biggest concern might be whether the roses needed watering or if the grass needed cutting. Her governess, Mrs. Henderson, arrived shortly after to begin the day's lessons. Mrs. Henderson was a kind, elderly woman who had been teaching royal children for over 30 years. She had an intuitive understanding of her young charges and could always sense when something was troubling them. As she began setting up the materials for Charlotte's mathematics lesson, she noticed the princess's distant expression. Meanwhile, Sergeant Mitchell continued his duties throughout the morning, but his thoughts kept returning to Charlotte. During his brief break, he made a phone call to his wife Sarah, explaining his idea and asking for her help in bringing it to fruition. Sarah, who worked as a teacher and understood children well, was immediately supportive of her husband's plan. The afternoon brought a series of scheduled appointments for Charlotte, including a piano lesson and a session with her art instructor. While she participated dutifully in each activity, her teachers noticed that her usual enthusiasm was lacking. The creativity that normally flowed so freely during her art sessions seemed constrained, and her piano playing, while technically correct, lacked the emotional expression that usually made her performances so engaging. As evening approached, Charlotte found herself back in her sitting room, this time working on homework assignments. The mathematics problems seemed more challenging than usual, not because they were particularly difficult, but because her heart wasn't in the work. She found her mind wandering to thoughts about her future, about the responsibilities that awaited her, and about the feeling that she was somehow not living up to everyone's expectations. Sergeant Mitchell's shift was coming to an end, but before he left the palace, he wanted to put his plan into motion. He had spoken with several other members of the security team throughout the day, sharing his observations about Princess Charlotte and his desire to do something to lift her spirits. To his surprise and relief, his colleagues were not only supportive, but eager to help in any way they could. The palace staff had always maintained a professional distance from the royal family, but that didn't mean they were unaware of or unaffected by the personal struggles of those they served. Many of them had been working at the palace for years and had developed genuine care and concern for the royal children. They understood that despite their privileged position, the young royals faced unique challenges that most children never had to navigate. As James prepared to leave for the day, he stopped by the palace workshop where maintenance and repairs were carried out. He spoke with Tom, the head of maintenance, explaining his idea and asking for assistance with the materials he would need. Tom, who had grandchildren of his own, was immediately enthusiastic about the project and offered to help in any way possible. That evening, Charlotte had dinner with her family in the private dining room. Prince William and Catherine tried to engage their daughter in conversation, asking about her lessons and her plans for the upcoming weekend. Charlotte responded politely but without her usual animation. Prince George and Prince Louis, sensing their sister's mood, were unusually quiet as well. After dinner, Charlotte retreated to her bedroom earlier than usual. She changed into her pajamas and sat on her bed looking through a photo album that contained pictures from various family vacations and royal events. In the photographs, she could see herself smiling and laughing, but those happy moments seemed like distant memories now. As she prepared for bed, Charlotte looked out her bedroom window at the palace grounds, illuminated by soft lighting. In the distance, she could see the guardhouse where the security officers spent their off-duty time. She had always been curious about the lives of the people who worked to protect her family, wondering what they did when they weren't on duty and whether they had families of their own. Unbeknownst to Charlotte, Sergeant Mitchell was at that very moment working on his special project. He had enlisted the help of his wife and daughters, and together they were putting the finishing touches on something that he hoped would remind the young princess that she was valued not just for her royal title, but for who she was as a person. The next morning arrived with a gentle spring rain patting against the palace windows. Charlotte woke earlier than usual, having had a restless night filled with dreams about endless royal ceremonies and faceless crowds of people watching her every move. She lay in bed for a few extra minutes, listening to the rain and trying to find the motivation to start another day. As she made her way to breakfast, Charlotte passed by the main entrance where Sergeant Mitchell was once again at his post. This time, however, there was something different about his demeanor. While he maintained his professional stance and serious expression, there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there the day before. Charlotte's morning lessons proceeded as usual, but Mrs. Henderson noticed that the princess seemed even more distracted than she had been recently. During a break between subjects, Mrs. Henderson gently asked Charlotte if there was anything troubling her. The princess shook her head and offered a small smile, but Mrs. Henderson could see that her young charge was struggling with something she didn't feel comfortable sharing. It was during Charlotte's lunch break that Sergeant Mitchell made his move. He had been waiting for the right moment when the princess would be alone and able to receive his gift without the formality that usually accompanied interactions between the royal family and their protection officers. Charlotte was walking through the corridor that led to the garden when Sergeant Mitchell approached her. His usual stern expression had softened, and he was carrying a small wrapped package in his hands. Charlotte stopped, surprised by this deviation from the normal protocol. "Your Royal Highness," James said, his voice gentle but respectful. "I hope you don't mind the interruption. I have something for you if you would be willing to accept it." Charlotte looked at the package with curiosity. It was wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with a yellow ribbon. There was nothing elaborate about it, but something about its humble appearance made it seem more special than the expensive gifts she was accustomed to receiving. "What is it?" Charlotte asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's something my family and I made for you," James replied. "We wanted you to know that you are thought of and cared about, not because of your title, but because of who you are." With trembling hands, Charlotte accepted the package. As she began to unwrap it, she could feel her heart beating faster with anticipation. The brown paper fell away to reveal a handmade scrapbook, its cover decorated with colorful drawings and the words, "For Princess Charlotte, our sunshine," written in a child's careful handwriting. As Charlotte opened the book, her eyes widened in amazement. The first page contained a photo of herself from a recent public appearance, but surrounding it were dozens of drawings, paintings, and written messages from children all over the kingdom. Each page was filled with artwork and notes expressing admiration, love, and encouragement for the young princess. Charlotte's hands trembled as she turned each page of the remarkable scrapbook. The artwork was clearly created by children of various ages, from toddlers who had scribbled colorful lines to teenagers who had drawn detailed portraits of her. Each contribution was unique, reflecting the personality and artistic ability of its young creator. On the second page, she found a drawing of herself wearing her favorite blue dress, surrounded by rainbow-colored flowers. The artist, a 7-year-old named Lucy from Manchester, had written beneath the picture, "Dear Princess Charlotte, you are the nicest princess in the whole world. I hope you have lots of friends and that you are happy always." As she continued through the book, Charlotte discovered messages from children across the United Kingdom. There were drawings of castles, horses, butterflies, and families. Some pages contained photographs of children holding signs with encouraging messages, while others featured handwritten letters expressing hopes and dreams for the princess's future. Sergeant Mitchell watched as Charlotte's expression slowly transformed. The sadness that had clouded her features for weeks was beginning to lift, replaced by wonder and genuine joy. He could see tears forming in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of frustration and loneliness she had been holding back. These were tears of happiness and gratitude. "How did you get all of these?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with awe as she looked up at the sergeant. "My daughters attend a local school," James explained, his formal tone softening. "They told their teacher about you, about how you're just a regular girl who happens to be a princess. Their teacher thought it would be wonderful if the children in their school could send you messages to let you know they think you're special." Charlotte turned another page and found a photograph of Sergeant Mitchell's 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, holding a large banner that read, "Princess Charlotte, you're our hero." Beneath the photo, they had written a joint message explaining how they had organized the project at their school and how it had grown from there. "Emma and Sophie?" Charlotte asked, reading their names from the message. "Yes, Your Royal Highness. They're 10 and 8 years old, and they've been following your public appearances with great interest. They wanted to do something to show you that children your age think you're doing an amazing job." As Charlotte continued reading, she learned about how the project had spread from one classroom to multiple schools across the country. Teachers had embraced the idea, seeing it as an opportunity to teach their students about kindness, empathy, and the importance of supporting one another. What had started as a simple gesture from Sergeant Mitchell's daughters had blossomed into a nationwide expression of love and encouragement. One page contained a letter from a group of children at a school in Wales. They had written about how they admired Charlotte's confidence during public speeches and how they hoped to be as brave as she was when they grew up. Another page featured artwork from students at a school in Scotland, who had drawn pictures of Charlotte engaging in various activities they thought she might enjoy, like playing football, reading books, and exploring nature. Charlotte paused at a page that contained a particularly moving message from a 9-year-old girl named Amelia, who lived in a small village in Yorkshire. Amelia had written about how she sometimes felt lonely and different from other children because her family moved frequently due to her father's job. She told Charlotte that seeing her handle the pressure of being different with such grace had inspired Amelia to be more confident in new situations. "She thinks I'm confident?" Charlotte whispered, more to herself than to Sergeant Mitchell. The idea that other children saw her as strong and brave was completely foreign to her. She had spent so much time focusing on her mistakes and inadequacies that she had never considered that others might view her positively. As she turned more pages, Charlotte found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. There were pictures of children dressed up as princesses, not in fancy costumes, but in everyday clothes with handmade crowns and capes. They had written about how Charlotte had shown them that being a princess wasn't about wearing beautiful gowns or living in a palace, but about being kind, caring, and trying to help others. One particularly touching contribution came from a group of children at a school for students with special needs. They had created a collaborative painting featuring Charlotte surrounded by children of all different abilities playing together. Their teacher had included a note explaining how the children had discussed Charlotte's advocacy for inclusion and how it had made them feel proud and valued. Sergeant Mitchell stood quietly as Charlotte absorbed each page, giving her the time and space she needed to process this unexpected gift. He could see the impact the scrapbook was having on her, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that his simple idea had brought such joy to the young princess. Charlotte came across a section that made her laugh out loud for the first time in days. It was a collection of jokes and riddles that children had written specifically for her. One 8-year-old had drawn a picture of a horse wearing a crown and had written beneath it, "Why did the royal horse refuse to jump over the fence? Because it didn't want to be a nightmare." The innocent humor and effort put into making her smile was overwhelming. Another page contained a series of photographs from a school assembly where children had performed a play about a kind princess who helped everyone in her kingdom. The teacher's note explained that the children had been inspired by Charlotte's charitable work and had wanted to create a story celebrating the values they saw her representing. As Charlotte neared the end of the scrapbook, she found a section that took her breath away. It was filled with letters from children who were facing their own challenges, some dealing with illness, others with family difficulties, and some struggling with bullying or social anxiety. Despite their own problems, each child had written to encourage Charlotte and to let her know that her strength gave them hope for their own situations. One letter, from a 10-year-old boy named Michael who was battling a serious illness, particularly moved her. He had written, "Dear Princess Charlotte, I know that being a princess must be scary sometimes. I get scared too when I have to go to the hospital for treatments. But when I see you on television being brave at those big events, it helps me remember that I can be brave too. Thank you for showing me that it's okay to be scared but still keep trying." Tears were now flowing freely down Charlotte's cheeks, but they were tears of joy and profound gratitude. She had never realized that her public appearances and royal duties, which often felt like burdens to her, were actually sources of inspiration for other children. The weight of responsibility she had been carrying suddenly felt different. Not lighter necessarily, but more meaningful. The final pages of the scrapbook contained messages from Sergeant Mitchell's own family. His wife Sarah had written a heartfelt letter explaining how proud she was that her husband had the opportunity to protect such a wonderful family. She had included a recipe for Charlotte's favorite cookies, which Sarah had learned about from Emma and Sophie's research into the princess's preferences. Emma and Sophie had each written individual letters to Charlotte, sharing details about their own lives and asking questions about hers. They had included photographs of their family pets, their bedrooms, and their favorite books, treating Charlotte as they would any other potential friend. Their innocent assumption that she might be interested in the ordinary details of their lives was both touching and refreshing. The very last page contained a message from Sergeant Mitchell himself. In his careful handwriting, he had written a letter explaining why he had felt compelled to create this gift. He wrote about watching Charlotte grow up over the years, about recognizing the signs of a child struggling with pressure and expectations, and about his belief that every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserved to know they were valued and loved. Charlotte closed the scrapbook and looked up at Sergeant Mitchell, her eyes still glistening with tears. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The formal protocol that usually governed their interactions had dissolved, replaced by a genuine human connection between a caring adult and a child in need of encouragement. "Thank you," Charlotte finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea that anyone felt this way about me. Your Royal Highness," James replied gently, "you are loved and admired by so many people, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. These children see in you what we all see, a kind, intelligent, and compassionate young person who is doing her best in a very difficult situation." Charlotte hugged the scrapbook to her chest, feeling as though she had been given the most precious gift imaginable. The loneliness and self-doubt that had been consuming her began to recede, replaced by a warm sense of connection and purpose. She realized that she wasn't alone in her struggles and that her efforts to fulfill her royal duties were actually making a positive difference in the lives of others. "Can I write back to them?" Charlotte asked eagerly. "Can I send messages to Emma and Sophie and to all these children who took the time to write to me?" Sergeant Mitchell smiled, pleased to see the excitement returning to the princess's voice. "I'm sure that could be arranged, Your Royal Highness. I think they would be absolutely thrilled to hear from you." As Charlotte made her way back to her private quarters, she felt as though she were walking on air. The scrapbook in her arms seemed to radiate warmth and love, and she couldn't wait to share this incredible gift with her parents. She knew that Prince William and Catherine had been worried about her recent mood, and she was excited to show them that there were people who believed in her and who found inspiration in her efforts. The remainder of Charlotte's day passed in a blur of excitement and newfound energy. During her afternoon lessons, Mrs. Henderson noticed an immediate change in the princess's demeanor. Charlotte was more engaged, more curious, and more willing to participate in discussions. The spark that had been missing from her eyes had returned, brighter than ever. That evening, Charlotte could hardly contain her excitement as she waited for her parents to join her for dinner. When Prince William and Catherine entered the dining room, they were immediately struck by the transformation in their daughter's appearance. The sadness that had clouded her features for weeks had been replaced by genuine happiness and enthusiasm. "Mummy, Papa, you have to see what I received today," Charlotte said, practically bouncing in her chair. "It's the most wonderful thing anyone has ever given me." Prince William and Catherine exchanged glances, both relieved and curious about what had brought about such a dramatic change in their daughter's mood. As Charlotte carefully placed the scrapbook on the table and began to explain how she had received it, both parents listened with growing amazement and gratitude. Charlotte excitedly showed her parents every page of the scrapbook, reading aloud the messages that had touched her heart the most. Prince William and Catherine listened intently, watching their daughter's face light up with each story she shared. They could hardly believe the transformation that had taken place in just one afternoon. "This little girl, Amelia, she thinks I'm brave," Charlotte said, pointing to one of the letters. "I never thought anyone would see me that way. I always feel so nervous during public events. But she says watching me helps her feel more confident." Catherine reached over and gently touched her daughter's hand. "Darling, you are brave. We've always known that, but perhaps we haven't told you enough. You handle situations that would be challenging for adults, and you do it with such grace and kindness." Prince William nodded in agreement, his eyes moist as he looked through the pages created by children from across the kingdom. "Charlotte, this is incredible. Sergeant Mitchell and his family, along with all these children, have created something truly special for you." As they continued through the scrapbook, Charlotte's parents began to understand the depth of impact their daughter had been having on young people throughout the country. They had always known that her public appearances were important, but seeing the genuine affection and admiration expressed by children her own age gave them a new perspective on the significance of her role. "I want to write back to them," Charlotte announced, "especially to Emma and Sophie because they started all this. And to Michael, the boy who's sick. I want to let him know that he inspires me too." "That's a wonderful idea," Catherine said. "We can work together to create responses for each of the children who contributed to your scrapbook. It will be a lovely project for us to do as a family." The rest of the dinner conversation revolved around Charlotte's plans for responding to the children. She was brimming with ideas about how she could show her appreciation and continue the connections that had been started through the scrapbook. Prince George and Prince Louis, initially puzzled by their sister's sudden enthusiasm, soon became caught up in her excitement and offered their own suggestions for how she could respond. After dinner, Charlotte asked if she could speak privately with her parents about Sergeant Mitchell's gift. In the comfortable sitting room with the scrapbook spread open before them, Charlotte began to articulate feelings she had been struggling with for months. "I've been feeling like I was failing everyone," Charlotte admitted, her voice soft but clear. "Like I wasn't good enough to be a princess, and that I was disappointing you and Granny and everyone who expects things from me." Prince William sat down beside his daughter and put his arm around her shoulders. "Oh, Charlotte, we had no idea you were feeling that way. You could never disappoint us. We're so proud of who you are and how you handle all the responsibilities that come with being part of our family." But reading these letters and seeing these pictures, Charlotte continued, it made me realize that maybe I've been thinking about everything wrong. These children don't expect me to be perfect. They just want me to be myself and to care about others, which I do. Catherine joined them on the sofa, taking Charlotte's hands in hers. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Being a good princess, and more importantly, being a good person, isn't about never making mistakes or always knowing what to do. It's about being kind, caring, and trying your best." The conversation continued late into the evening, with Charlotte sharing thoughts and feelings she had been keeping to herself for months. Her parents listened with a mixture of pride and concern, realizing that their daughter had been carrying burdens they hadn't fully understood. They made a commitment to have more regular conversations about the challenges she was facing and to ensure that she never again felt like she had to struggle alone. The next morning, Charlotte woke with a sense of purpose and excitement that had been absent for far too long. She dressed quickly and made her way to the main entrance of the palace, hoping to catch Sergeant Mitchell before his shift began. She wanted to thank him properly for the incredible gift he had given her. James was just arriving for duty when Charlotte appeared in the corridor. Seeing her approach with obvious excitement was a welcome change from the subdued, sad little girl he had encountered the previous morning. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," James said, maintaining his professional demeanor but allowing warmth to show in his eyes. "Good morning, Sergeant Mitchell," Charlotte replied formally, then broke into a huge smile. "I stayed up until almost midnight looking through the scrapbook. It's the most wonderful thing anyone has ever given me." "I'm very glad it pleased you," James replied. "My daughters will be thrilled to hear that you enjoyed their project." "I've been thinking," Charlotte said, her enthusiasm evident. "I'd like to visit Emma and Sophie's school if that would be possible. I want to meet all the children who contributed to the scrapbook and thank them in person." James was surprised by this request. While royal family members did make visits to schools, they were usually formal affairs arranged weeks or months in advance, with extensive security protocols and official ceremonies. Charlotte's desire for a more personal, informal visit was both touching and potentially complicated. "That's a very kind thought, Your Royal Highness," James said carefully. "Such a visit would need to be arranged through the proper channels with your parents' approval and coordination with the palace staff." "I know," Charlotte said quickly. "I'm going to talk to Mummy and Papa about it today. But I wanted to ask you first, to make sure Emma and Sophie and their friends would want me to come." "I think they would be absolutely delighted," James replied, his formal tone softening. "But more than that, I think they would be honored, you see. What you don't realize is that these children look up to you not because you're a princess, but because of who you are as a person." Charlotte's face glowed with happiness at these words, the validation from someone she respected. Someone who saw her regularly but wasn't family meant more to her than she could express. Later that morning, Charlotte approached her parents with her idea for visiting the school. Prince William and Catherine were initially surprised by the spontaneous nature of the request, as royal engagements were typically planned well in advance. However, they were so pleased to see their daughter's renewed enthusiasm and sense of purpose that they agreed to explore the possibility. "We'll need to speak with the private secretary's office," Prince William explained. "Any public engagement requires security arrangements and coordination with the school administration. But I think it's a wonderful idea, Charlotte. It shows that you understand the importance of the connections you make with people." Catherine added, "We could perhaps arrange it as an informal visit rather than a formal royal engagement. That way it would feel more natural and personal for everyone involved." While the adults worked on the logistics of a potential school visit, Charlotte threw herself into creating responses to the children who had contributed to her scrapbook. She spent hours crafting individual thank you notes, drawing pictures, and selecting small gifts that she thought each child would enjoy. For Michael, the boy who was battling illness, Charlotte wrote a particularly heartfelt letter. She shared some of her own fears and challenges, explaining how his courage in facing medical treatments had inspired her to be braver in her own difficult moments. She included a small stuffed animal that had been given to her during a hospital visit, along with a note explaining that she hoped it would bring him comfort during his treatments. To Amelia, the girl who had written about feeling different and alone, Charlotte sent a letter about the importance of being true to yourself and finding strength in the things that make you unique. She included a book of poetry that had helped her during difficult times, with several passages marked as her favorites. For Emma and Sophie, Charlotte created a special care package that included photographs of herself engaging in everyday activities, along with letters describing her daily routine and answering the questions they had asked about her life. She wanted them to see that despite the palace setting and royal responsibilities, she was still just a regular girl with interests and concerns similar to their own. As Charlotte worked on these personal responses, she began to understand the true impact of Sergeant Mitchell's gift. The scrapbook had not only lifted her spirits, but had also opened her eyes to the positive influence she could have on others. Instead of focusing on the pressure and expectations of her role, she began to see the opportunities it provided for making meaningful connections and inspiring others. The palace staff noticed the change in Charlotte immediately. Mrs. Henderson reported that the princess was more engaged in her lessons and asked thoughtful questions about how her education could help her better serve others in the future. Her art instructor noted that Charlotte's creativity had returned with renewed vigor, and she was experimenting with new techniques and subjects in her paintings. Even her music teacher observed the transformation. Charlotte's piano playing had regained its emotional expressiveness, and she was eager to learn new pieces that she could potentially perform for others. The mechanical, dutiful approach to her studies had been replaced by genuine curiosity and enthusiasm. A week after receiving the scrapbook, Charlotte's wish to visit Emma and Sophie's school was approved. The visit was arranged as an informal engagement, with minimal media coverage and a focus on genuine interaction rather than formal ceremony. Charlotte was practically vibrating with excitement as the day approached. On the morning of the visit, Charlotte chose her outfit carefully. Instead of the formal dresses she typically wore to royal engagements, she selected a simple, colorful dress that was similar to what the school children might wear. She wanted to look approachable and friendly rather than formal and distant. Sergeant Mitchell accompanied the royal family to the school, as was protocol for security purposes. However, for him, this visit held special personal significance. His daughters had been preparing for weeks, practicing what they would say and working with their classmates to prepare a special presentation for Princess Charlotte. As the royal car pulled up to the school, Charlotte could see dozens of excited faces pressed against the windows. The children had been told about the visit, but seeing the princess actually arrive was still almost unbelievable for many of them. Charlotte waved enthusiastically from the car window, her genuine excitement matching that of the children inside the building. The school principal, Mrs. Roberts, greeted the royal family at the entrance. She had been working closely with the palace staff to ensure that the visit felt natural and comfortable for everyone involved. The goal was to create an atmosphere where Charlotte could interact with the children as naturally as possible, without the formality that typically surrounded royal visits. "Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Ju Roberts said warmly, "we are absolutely thrilled to welcome you to our school. The children have been beside themselves with excitement since we told them about your visit." Charlotte beamed as she was led into the school. The corridors were decorated with artwork created by the students, much of it inspired by the scrapbook project that had started everything. There were paintings of castles, princesses, and children playing together, along with motivational quotes about kindness, courage, and friendship. The first stop was Emma and Sophie's classroom, where Charlotte would meet the children who had initiated the scrapbook project. As she entered the room, Charlotte was greeted by a chorus of excited voices calling out, "Princess Charlotte!" The genuine enthusiasm and affection in their voices was overwhelming, and Charlotte had to blink back tears of joy. Emma and Sophie stepped forward, both visibly nervous but beaming with pride. They had prepared a short speech thanking Charlotte for her visit, and explaining how the scrapbook project had brought their entire school community together. As they spoke, Charlotte could see the love and effort that had gone into every aspect of the gift she had received. "We never imagined that our little project would grow into something so big," Emma said, her voice slightly shaky with nerves. "But we're so happy that it made you feel better, because you always make us feel proud and happy when we see you on television." Charlotte knelt down to Emma and Sophie's level, taking their hands in hers. "You two have given me the most precious gift I've ever received," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You help me remember why I love being able to meet people like you, and why my role as a princess is such an honor." The visit continued throughout the morning, with Charlotte spending time in different classrooms, looking at the artwork that had been contributed to her scrapbook, and hearing the stories behind each creation. She listened intently as children explained their drawings, asked thoughtful questions about their interests and hobbies, and shared details about her own life that made her seem more relatable and human. In one classroom, Charlotte met a group of children who had created a large mural depicting scenes of kindness and friendship. Each child had painted a section showing people helping others, and they eagerly explained their artwork to the princess. Charlotte was particularly moved by a painting created by a shy 7-year-old named Thomas, who had depicted Charlotte helping an elderly person cross the street. "I saw you do this on television once," Thomas explained quietly, his face flushed with excitement at having the princess's full attention. "You stopped to help a lady who was having trouble with her walking stick, and it made me want to help people too." Charlotte was amazed to learn that such a small gesture, one she had made without thinking during a public walkabout, had been noticed and remembered by this young boy. It reinforced the lesson she had been learning about the impact of her actions, even the ones that seemed insignificant to her. "That's wonderful, Thomas," Charlotte said warmly. "Helping others is one of the most important things we can do. Your painting shows that you have a very kind heart, and I'm sure you help people in many ways." As the morning progressed, Charlotte found herself in conversations with children from various backgrounds and circumstances. There was Maria, whose family had immigrated from Spain and who had written about how Charlotte's acceptance of diversity had made her feel welcome in her new country. There was James, a boy with autism who had created an incredibly detailed drawing of Buckingham Palace from memory and had written about how Charlotte's patience during a previous public event had inspired him to be more confident in social situations. Each interaction reinforced Charlotte's growing understanding of the positive influence she could have simply by being herself and showing genuine care for others. The children didn't expect her to be perfect or to have all the answers. They were inspired by her humanity, her kindness, and her willingness to connect with them as individuals. During lunch, Charlotte sat with a small group of students in the school cafeteria, eating the same meal they were served, and engaging in normal childhood conversations about favorite books, movies, and activities. The informality of the setting allowed her to relax completely, and observers noted that this was perhaps the most natural and happy they had ever seen the young princess in a public setting. "Do you really live in a palace?" asked a curious 8-year-old named Jessica. "I do," Charlotte replied with a smile, "but it's not as exciting as it sounds. It's a very old building with lots of rooms, but my favorite place is my bedroom because I get to decorate it however I like, just like you do with yours." "Do you have any pets?" another child inquired. "We have a dog named Orla," Charlotte explained. "She's a Cocker Spaniel, and she's very good at making me laugh when I'm feeling sad." "Do any of you have pets?" This simple question led to an animated discussion about various pets, with children sharing stories about their dogs, cats, hamsters, and fish. Charlotte listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and sharing her own funny stories about Orla's mischievous behavior. The naturalness of these conversations was exactly what Prince William and Catherine had hoped for when they approved the visit. They watched from a respectful distance as their daughter connected with the children in a way that was authentic and joyful. This was the Charlotte they knew at home. Curious, kind, and genuinely interested in others. After lunch, Charlotte was invited to participate in an art class where the children were working on a collaborative project. They were creating individual tiles that would be assembled into a large mosaic representing unity and friendship. Charlotte was given her own tile to decorate, and she worked alongside the other children, chatting and laughing as they painted. "What are you going to paint?" asked Sophie, who was working on a tile next to Charlotte's. "I think I'll paint a bridge," Charlotte replied thoughtfully, "because bridges connect different places just like friendship connects different people." As she painted, Charlotte found herself completely absorbed in the activity. The stress and formality that usually accompanied her public appearances had completely disappeared, replaced by the simple joy of creating something beautiful alongside new friends. The art teacher, Miss Peterson, observed the princess's obvious enjoyment of the activity. "Charlotte has a natural artistic ability," she commented to Catherine, who had joined the class to observe. "She's also wonderful with the other children. They respond so naturally to her because she treats them as equals rather than as subjects." As the afternoon drew to a close, Charlotte participated in a special assembly where the entire school had gathered to present her with a gift they had created together. It was a large book containing messages and artwork from every student in the school, not just those who had contributed to the original scrapbook. The assembly began with a performance by the school choir, who sang a song they had written specifically for Charlotte's visit. The lyrics spoke about kindness, courage, and the importance of being true to yourself, and Charlotte was deeply moved by the thoughtfulness and creativity that had gone into the composition. Following the musical performance, children from different grades took turns presenting sections of their gift book to Charlotte. There were poems about friendship, drawings of the princess engaging in various activities, and stories about how her example had inspired them in their own lives. One particularly touching moment came when Michael, the boy who had written about his illness, was brought to the assembly via video call from the hospital where he was receiving treatment. Although he couldn't be there in person, the school had arranged for him to participate virtually so he could see Charlotte and hear her response to his contribution. "Michael," Charlotte said, looking directly into the camera, "your letter meant more to me than I can express. Knowing that my public appearances have helped you feel braver during your treatments makes every difficult moment worthwhile. You are the truly brave one, and I want you to know that thinking about your courage helps me when I'm facing scary situations too." Michael's face lit up with joy and pride as he heard these words from the princess. His parents, visible in the background of the video call, were visibly emotional as they watched their son receive this personal acknowledgement from someone he admired so much. As the assembly concluded, Charlotte was asked to sign the guest book and share a few words with the assembled children. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of young faces that had shown her such kindness and acceptance. "When I woke up this morning," Charlotte began, her voice clear and confident, "I thought I was coming here to thank you for the wonderful scrapbook you created for me. But I realize now that you've given me something much more valuable than that. You've taught me that being a princess isn't about being perfect or never feeling scared. It's about caring for others and trying to make a positive difference in their lives." She paused, looking around the room at the attentive faces. "You've all shown me so much kindness and creativity, and you've helped me understand that I don't have to carry the weight of my responsibilities alone. Knowing that you believe in me and support me makes me want to work even harder to make you proud." The children erupted in applause, many of them calling out expressions of love and encouragement. Charlotte felt overwhelmed by the genuine affection in the room, and she understood that this experience had changed her fundamentally. As the royal family prepared to leave the school, Charlotte made personal goodbyes to Emma, Sophie, and the other children who had played special roles in creating her scrapbook. She promised to stay in touch through letters and to remember everything they had taught her about the importance of being authentic and kind. Sergeant Mitchell, who had watched the day's events unfold with deep satisfaction, approached Charlotte as the family was preparing to depart. "Your Royal Highness," he said formally, then smiled warmly. "I think Emma and Sophie will be talking about this day for the rest of their lives. Thank you for making their dream come true." "Thank you, Sergeant Mitchell," Charlotte replied. "Your daughters and their friends have changed my life. I'll never forget the lesson they've taught me about the importance of genuine connections and the power of kindness." The drive back to the palace was filled with excited chatter as Charlotte recounted her favorite moments from the day. Prince George and Prince Louis listened with interest as their sister described the artwork, the performances, and the conversation she had shared with the children. "They were just like us," Charlotte observed. "They worry about things and get excited about things and want to help others. I never realized before how much we have in common with children who don't live in palaces." Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. That's a very important realization, Charlotte. It will serve you well throughout your life as a member of the royal family. That evening, Charlotte spent time in her room, carefully placing the new gift book alongside the original scrapbook that had started everything. She reread some of her favorite messages and studied the artwork that had been created especially for her. The loneliness and self-doubt that had plagued her for months seemed like distant memories now. As she prepared for bed, Charlotte reflected on the transformation that had taken place over the past week. The simple act of kindness from Sergeant Mitchell and his family had opened her eyes to a completely new way of understanding her role and her relationships with others. She had learned that being a princess didn't mean being perfect or never feeling uncertain. Instead, it meant being genuine, caring, and willing to connect with others in meaningful ways. The next morning brought a return to Charlotte's regular routine of lessons and royal duties, but everything felt different now. She approached her studies with renewed interest, seeing them as preparation for future opportunities to serve others. Her piano practice took on new meaning as she imagined performing for children like those she had met at the school. Mrs. Henderson immediately noticed the change in Charlotte's approach to her education. The princess asked thoughtful questions about history, wondering how past members of the royal family had handled challenges similar to her own. She showed increased interest in current events, wanting to understand the issues affecting the people she would one day serve. During her art lessons, Charlotte's creativity flowed more freely than it had in months. She began working on a series of paintings inspired by her visit to the school, capturing the joy and energy she had witnessed in the children's faces. Her art instructor noted that Charlotte's work had gained a new emotional depth and authenticity. The impact of the scrapbook and school visit extended beyond Charlotte's personal growth. Prince William and Catherine had gained valuable insights into the pressures their daughter had been experiencing, and the importance of maintaining open communication with her about the challenges of royal life. They made adjustments to Charlotte's schedule, ensuring that she had more time for informal interactions and personal interests. The palace staff also took note of the positive changes in the princess. There was a lightness to her step and a warmth in her interactions that had been missing for months. She began taking more interest in the people around her, asking about their families and showing genuine care for their well-being. Most importantly, Charlotte had discovered that her role as a princess could be a source of joy rather than just responsibility. The connection she had made with the children had shown her that her position provided unique opportunities to inspire, encourage, and support others. Rather than feeling burdened by expectations, she began to see her public duties as chances to make meaningful differences in people's lives. Several months after the transformative school visit, Charlotte's renewed confidence and joy became evident to everyone around her. Her public appearances took on a new quality of authenticity and warmth that was immediately noticeable to both the media and the public. Where once she had seemed nervous and uncertain, she now approached her royal duties with genuine enthusiasm and natural grace. The relationship between Charlotte and Sergeant Mitchell had evolved into something special within the bounds of appropriate protocol. While maintaining the necessary professional distance, James had become a trusted figure in Charlotte's life, someone she knew cared about her well-being beyond his official duties. Occasionally, she would stop to share updates about her correspondence with Emma and Sophie, or to tell him about a particularly meaningful interaction from a recent public engagement. Charlotte had indeed maintained her correspondence with the children from the school, creating a network of young pen pals who provided her with perspectives on life outside the palace walls. These letters had become one of her most treasured activities, and she spent considerable time crafting thoughtful responses to each child who wrote to her. Emma and Sophie had become particularly close correspondents, sharing details about their school experiences, family activities, and dreams for the future. Through their letters, Charlotte gained insights into the everyday challenges and joys of children her age, which helped her relate more authentically to the young people she met during official engagements. The correspondence with Michael, the boy who had been battling illness, held special significance for Charlotte, and she followed his treatment progress through his letters and sent him encouragement during difficult periods. When Michael successfully completed his treatment, Charlotte was among the first to congratulate him, and his recovery became a source of personal joy and inspiration for her. The transformation in Charlotte's approach to her royal duties was most evident during public engagements. Where she had once appeared stiff and overly formal, she now engaged naturally with people of all ages, showing genuine interest in their stories and concerns. Her ability to connect with children, in particular, became one of her greatest strengths. During a visit to a children's hospital, Charlotte spent time with young patients, listening to their experiences and sharing stories from her own life that she thought might amuse or inspire them. Her natural empathy and ability to communicate at their level brought smiles to faces that had seen too much suffering for such young souls. At a school for children with special needs, Charlotte demonstrated remarkable patience and understanding, adapting her communication style to connect with each child individually. Teachers and parents were amazed by her intuitive ability to recognize what each child needed, whether it was quiet encouragement, playful interaction, or simply someone to sit quietly beside them. The media began to take notice of Charlotte's evolving public persona. Articles appeared praising her natural warmth and authenticity, with royal commentators noting that she seemed to have found her own unique approach to royal duties. Unlike previous generations who had followed more formal protocols, Charlotte appeared to be developing a style that was both respectful of tradition and refreshingly modern. Prince William and Catherine watched their daughter's development with pride and relief. The confident, joyful child they knew at home was finally able to shine in public settings. They credited Sergeant Mitchell's thoughtful gift with providing the catalyst for Charlotte's transformation, and they made sure he understood how grateful they were for his insight and compassion. The impact of Charlotte's renewed confidence extended to her relationships with her brothers as well. Prince George, who had always been protective of his sister, was delighted to see her happiness return. He began seeking her advice about his own royal responsibilities, recognizing that Charlotte had developed valuable insights about connecting with the public. Prince Louis, being younger, was simply happy to have his playful, energetic sister back. Charlotte's renewed joy translated into more fun family time, with games, adventures around the palace grounds, and collaborative projects that brought the siblings closer together. As Charlotte approached her 9th birthday, she requested a special celebration that reflected her new understanding of her role. Instead of a traditional royal birthday celebration, she asked to host a party for children from various charities and organizations she had visited throughout the year. She wanted to celebrate with the young people who had taught her so much about courage, resilience, and joy. The party was held in the palace gardens, with activities designed to be inclusive and enjoyable for children from diverse backgrounds and abilities. Charlotte moved through the groups of guests like a natural hostess, ensuring that everyone felt welcome and included. Her genuine care for each child was evident as she remembered details from previous meetings and asked follow-up questions about their lives and interests. Sergeant Mitchell was on duty during the birthday celebration, and Charlotte made a point of introducing Emma and Sophie to other children at the party, helping to facilitate new friendships. Watching his daughters interact so naturally with the princess and seeing how their initial gift had blossomed into something much larger filled James with deep satisfaction. During a quiet moment in the celebration, Charlotte approached Sergeant Mitchell with a small wrapped package. "I have something for you," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's a thank you gift for changing my life." Inside the package, James found a hand-painted portrait of his family, created by Charlotte herself. She had painted the picture from the photograph Emma and Sophie had included in the original scrapbook, but had added details and colors that brought the image to life. On the back, she had written a heartfelt message expressing her gratitude for his kindness and explaining how his gift had helped her discover the true meaning of her role as a princess. "Your Royal Highness," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is incredibly beautiful. My family will treasure it always." "You taught me that being a princess isn't about being perfect," Charlotte replied. "It's about caring for others and helping them feel valued and loved. That's exactly what you did for me, and I'll never forget it." As the birthday party continued around them, both Charlotte and Sergeant Mitchell understood that they had been part of something truly special. A simple act of kindness had grown into a transformation that would influence not only Charlotte's approach to her royal duties, but also the lives of countless people she would meet in the years to come. The lessons Charlotte learned from the scrapbook experience became foundational to her character development. She carried with her the understanding that authentic connections with others were more valuable than perfect performances, that vulnerability could be a strength rather than a weakness, and that her role as a princess provided unique opportunities to make positive differences in people's lives. Years later, as Charlotte grew into her role as a senior member of the royal family, she would often reference the period when she received the scrapbook as a turning point in her life. The children who had contributed to that first collection of artwork and letters continued to hold special places in her heart, and many of them remained correspondents well into their teenage years. Emma and Sophie, in particular, became lifelong friends despite the obvious differences in their circumstances. They visited the palace for special occasions, attended Charlotte's graduation ceremonies, and shared in her major life milestones. Their friendship served as a reminder to Charlotte of the importance of maintaining connections with people outside the royal bubble. Michael, whose recovery from illness had been such a source of inspiration for Charlotte, went on to study medicine with the goal of helping other children facing serious health challenges. Charlotte's encouragement during his treatment had played a significant role in his determination to overcome his illness and use his experience to help others. The original scrapbook remained one of Charlotte's most prized possessions throughout her life. She kept it in a place of honor in her private chambers, and she often returned to it when she needed reminding of the impact that simple acts of kindness could have. The messages and artwork continued to inspire her during challenging times and to remind her of the genuine love and support that existed for her among the people she served. Sergeant Mitchell continued his service with the Royal Protection Unit until his retirement, always maintaining the highest professional standards while nurturing the special connection he had developed with the royal family. His daughters grew up with a unique understanding of the human side of royalty, having witnessed firsthand how their simple act of kindness had transformed a lonely little girl into a confident young woman. Charlotte's story became an inspiration within royal circles and beyond. It demonstrated the power of genuine human connection to transcend social barriers and reminded people that even those in positions of privilege and power need compassion, understanding, and encouragement. The transformation that began with a handmade scrapbook influenced Charlotte's entire approach to her royal duties. She became known for her ability to connect authentically with people from all walks of life, her genuine interest in their stories and struggles, and her commitment to using her position to make meaningful differences in their lives. More importantly, Charlotte learned that being true to herself and showing genuine care for others was not only acceptable but essential to effective royal service. The fear of imperfection that had once paralyzed her was replaced by the confidence that came from understanding her own worth and the value of authentic human connection. The legacy of Sergeant Mitchell's gift extended far beyond its immediate impact on Charlotte. It served as a reminder that kindness and compassion can flourish in any environment, that taking time to understand and care for others is always worthwhile, and that sometimes the simplest gestures can have the most profound effects. Charlotte's tears of joy upon receiving the scrapbook marked not just a moment of happiness, but the beginning of a lifetime dedicated to bringing that same joy to others. The young princess, who had once felt isolated and uncertain, grew into a confident royal who understood that her greatest strength lay not in being perfect, but in being genuinely caring and authentically herself. The story of the scrapbook became part of palace lore, told and retold as an example of how small acts of kindness can change lives in ways that no one could have anticipated. It reminded everyone within the royal household of the importance of seeing beyond titles and positions, to recognize the human beings who need love, support, and encouragement just like everyone else. In the years that followed, Charlotte would often create her own versions of Sergeant Mitchell's gift for children and adults who seemed to need encouragement. She understood that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, needed to feel valued and loved, and she made it her mission to provide that affirmation whenever possible. The handmade scrapbook that had once brought tears of joy to a sad little princess became the inspiration for countless acts of kindness, creating ripples of compassion that spread far beyond the palace walls and touched lives in ways that will never be fully known or measured. It stands as a testament to the transformative power of love, understanding, and the simple human desire to care for one another.